Eric Blake has a question. He writes, wow, it's a long one. Hey, Bill. Hey, Eric. Yesterday on Hot Mike, you and Michael Knowles brought up superhero films. I personally think you two might not be giving those films enough credit. Consider, first of all, I think a major reason such films are apparently propping up Hollywood right now, is that it's the one genre conservative audiences can enjoy without fearing that the movie might insult our values and principles. In fact, oftentimes our principles are actually promoted and affirmed. See the Dark Knight trilogy, taking on terrorism and the occupiers, Man of Steel, restoring Superman's devotion to the American way, Captain America waxing eloquent on the value of liberty, and so on. Second, with superhero films becoming a genre now, I've actually seen a wide variety of stories. It isn't the same story over and over, far from it. Ant-Man is an Ocean's 11 style heist film. Captain America, Winter Soldier is a 70s style political thriller, and so on. So my question is, with a new genre consistently treating conservatism with respect and coincidentally propping up the otherwise struggling Hollywood, is this possibly the Tinseltown establishment effectively admitting they can't exist without conservatism fueling both society and story? Well, it's a long question, but a really good one. Let me take the second part of it first. There's an interesting phenomenon, a fascinating phenomenon, and I've had a chance to talk with Jeremy Boring about this and a few other people. And let's just call it the Firefly effect. So here was this TV show Firefly and a movie Serenity. It's basically cowboys in space. Pretty much simple. It's cowboys in space. And the lead character, Mal Reynolds, is, I think it's Reynolds. Mal, the captain, is as conservative a character as you're ever going to find. And he has, I'm going to butcher this line for actual fans, but basically, somebody says, you're going to kill me, and he says, look, if I'm going to kill you, it's going to be looking at you eye to eye, and you're going to be armed. That's a profoundly conservative thing to say. I aim to misbehave. The whole theme of the movie Serenity was that the social engineers tried to breed violence out of people, and they ended up making this mutant race of reavers that are just nothing but violence personified. And around and around and around it goes. And it's consistently conservative. And that's written by Joss Whedon. And Joss Whedon comes out and does one of the most left-wing political messages of the last election cycle. He's a gigantic, enormous liberal, huge progressive. And how do you square that? And Jeremy and I, discussing it, came to the conclusion that my suggestion was, when you sit down to write a story, your core comes out. I mean, if you're any good, when you write something worthwhile, you'll look at it and you'll read it. And even though you just wrote it, you'll read it for the first time. You're not really creating it so much as you're just channeling it, which means it's coming from someplace very deep. It's coming from very, very deep emotional place and psychological place and so on. So my contention is that Joss Whedon is a gigantic conservative. He writes like a conservative. His heroes are conservative. His plot lines are conservative. He has conservative dialogue. I don't think you can fake that. I think the fake part of Joss Whedon is the liberal part. I think he's a gigantic progressive because everybody around him is as well. And he would like to continue to work in this town, and he'd like to not lose all his friends. And so I'm not saying that Joss Whedon is a closet conservative who's just pretending to be a liberal. He's an enormous progressive left-winger. But I think the reason he is because he understands on some level the cognitive dissonance between what he says he believes and what he writes. And I believe the stuff that he writes is the real him. And so I suspect that what he does psychologically is he buys into the whole conservatives are racist and Nazis kind of thing, and it gives him a place to park. But in any event, he is a great example of this, and he's just a personal example. again and again and again, if you look at Hollywood, what you find is people like Matt Damon and Jamie Foxx talking about gun control while in the theaters, their characters are blowing people away. Here's David Wellman. He says, if I ever kill you, you'll be awake, you'll be facing me, and you'll be armed. That's profoundly great line. He's a great writer. So you get Jamie Foxx and Matt Damon talking about gun control while they're up on screen blowing people away in a way that actual conservatives with real guns would never do. And the sort of the pornographic violence and things like The Matrix, the shootout scene in the first Matrix in the bank lobby is it absolutely astonishingly great piece of film. It's one of those 5 minutes of film that you can count on one hand as just saying that this is what the art form is about. The shootout scene in the bank lobby on The Matrix is like the helicopter attack in Apocalypse Now. It's like the docking sequence in 2001. It's like it's one of those things that's just like, it's just so perfectly done. But if you look at the Matrix movie, it's porn. It's pornography. It's violent pornography. It's just people killing people who are policemen, by the way, and security guards. And people in long black trench coats with black glasses are killing people left and right, but they're not real people. They just go down. And the music and the editing and the score and the effects is just absolutely brilliant. And the Wachowski brothers, or brother and sister, or whatever they are now, undoubtedly far, far left-wing, enormously left-wing people. But they're making a video about gun violence that the people who actually own guns would never, ever imagine, just beyond their imagining. So it's weird. They're stuck. I don't know if Carroll O'Connor was a gigantic liberal. I suspect he was. Without question, Norman Lear was. Archie Bunker, is kind of the, I guess that's why they called him Archie. He's the arch conservative. He's the foil. He's the stupid one. He's the biased one, the bigoted one. He's the racist one, all of that. But he's also the honest one. He's the one who's got an actual heart. And despite Norman Lear's best efforts and everybody else's best efforts, Norman Lear wanted people to love Mike Stivic, and they didn't. They loved Archie Bunker. And the reason they loved Archie Bunker is because Mike Stivic is parasitical on Archie Bunker. Mike Stivic insults Archie all the time while he lives under his roof and eats his food. And on some level, you can't escape that. So this is kind of a consistent theme of left-wingers of left-wingers ending up writing extremely right-wing stuff because it's just better morality. It's a better story. You don't write a story about a group of people. There are no stories about collectives. You don't have a collective hero. And as I've said, even if you take something that is about a collective teamwork, like a football movie, let's say, Rudy is not about the entire Notre Dame team. Rudy's about one guy and Friday Night Lights and the rest of it. It's not about every single player on the team. There's 3 or 4 people that stand out. This is why the essence of storytelling is conservative. It's individuals arrayed against great power with very high stakes, doing heroic things on their own. James Bond does not confront the villain with a strongly worded letter from the United Nations. He's got a Walther PPK. Doesn't drive off at a reasonable speed in a Prius. He's got a Jaguar. And it doesn't matter how liberal you are politically as a writer, you cannot write liberal stuff because there's no story there. And there's no ethics there. And I'm not joking about that. I use that term a lot, that little phrase a lot, because I like it. But it's true. I mean, it's actually true. Think about going to see a movie where going to see a movie about a group of activists, and their plan for stopping world evil is to write a harshly worded letter and drive off in a reasonable speed at a Prius. there's no story there. Nobody wants to watch that. Nobody wants to watch that. And they don't want to watch it because it's not watchable, because it's nothing interesting there. There's nothing noble, nothing great. It's just the same kind of, soggy kind of oatmeal that Sweden is. It's just pablum. It's something you just gum. You don't even need any teeth for it. So it's the great tragedy of our times. Now back to the comic book aspect of that. On the show, I said I think comic books are losing steam. I think there's no question about that. They're still doing very big box office, and strangely enough, just before the show, I was looking at a bunch of trailers for Avengers Infinity War and Thor Ragnarok and all of this other stuff. And they're all strong. And then that's just the Marvel stuff, the DC stuff, Justice League and Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman had good box office and so on. I didn't mean to suggest that they are about to tank, but they are certainly past peak popularity and peak wonder. I mean, the first time I saw Iron Man, which really started it, was almost, 10 years ago, more. First time I saw Iron Man, I went, whoa. And I loved the first Spider-Man series with, what's his name? The guy, it'll come to me in a second. But they were great. And now there are so many of them. There's been, 3 Iron Mans, 3 Thors, I want to say, 2 or 3 Captain Americas, a couple of Avengers, third one on the way. There's been Doctor Strange, and now they're putting them all together, and everybody's going, wow, Doctor Strange in the same movie as Spider-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, that's true, and it's cool to see these people bundled together, but, I mean, how many times can you do it? They will continue to make money, but they're not fresh, is the point I was trying to make, and perhaps I didn't make clearly enough. There's nothing fresh about them anymore. There are great stories, perhaps, or interesting twists on storylines, and they hold your interest, or maybe they've got a point to make or so on, but they're not fresh. And I have to tell you, I saw Man of Steel, which was and I think he's the best Superman I've ever seen. Well, maybe Chris Reeve was better because he was much more friendly and accessible, but this Superman is fantastic. And I watched Man of Steel. It's an American god. See ya. And I watched the end of that movie, and the final 90 minutes of Man of Steel are 2 computer-generated immortal supermen bashing themselves with ever bigger things. And I have to tell you, the final hour of that movie, I don't think I've been that bored. Tobey Maguire thinks. I can't remember being that bored. What's going to happen? Oh, okay, so Zod's going to punch him through a museum, and then Superman's going to pick up a train and bat him on the head with a railway car, and then Zod's going to knock him through the Hoover Dam, and then Superman's going to pick up a tanker, an ocean liner or something, and bash him over the head with that. And neither one of them are going to have any effect. All they're going to do is just show more buildings coming down and glass flying and all the rest. It was incredibly dull to me, and that wasn't the case 10 years ago. They were fresh. They were like, wow. They're not that anymore. And I can't track it anymore. I don't go to all of them. I've gone to some of them. And so I can't track all the storylines now. And I don't know how many movies are coming out. I know Avengers 3 is coming out. Iron Man 4 is coming out. There might be another Doctor Strange. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 just came out. There'll probably be a 3. But it's not fresh. There's nothing new. And Iron Man 3 was direct, Troy Stevens says. It was absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. And again, that movie was terrible because what were the villains? Well, we've already fought bad guys and beat them in Iron Man 1. Then we fought against another kind of an Iron Man in Iron Man 2. So let's have thousands of Iron Men that we can go and destroy. And it's, it's just dull. And this kind of action, that kind of so-called action sequences are boring in the way that Lucas made the prequels boring. If there is anything that I am less afraid of in the fictional world, it's a battle droid. They are designed to look funny. These battle droids are designed to look like they look like Jar Jar. They're designed to be comic foils. And how many times do I have to see invincible Jedi reflecting blaster bolts off of battle droids and having them burst into sparks? I mean, how many times do you have to see it? Where is the drama there? What's the thrill? Where's the emotional connection? There's none. And ultimately, in the prequels, Lucas got to the place where all these things are ending up, which is you have a gigantic spectacle of computer-generated clones fighting computer-generated robots. And who do you root for? Nobody. You hope they all die. I got clones on one hand, I got robots on the other. I hope they all die. I don't like any of them. So there you go. And then all along, comes the Abrams reboot of Force Awakens, and now we've got real people, and the scale is much smaller. Same for Rogue One. It's a much tighter universe. We're not going and listening to people preaching about politics and trade agreements and stuff. We got a guy in the desert, and he's trying to find water, and you got a woman with a stick, and she's trying to save her life and find her family, and all the rest of it. It's great. And the best example of this is in terms of getting away from the staleness of spectacle. That's what I'll call it. It's just the staleness of spectacle. I've seen it. Yes, it's cool. I admit I had not seen the Empire State Building used as a hypodermic needle in somebody's arm before. Yes, that's really amazing, but I have no emotional connection to this. And the great example of this, I think, was the James Bond series, because the first Bonds were very, very, very engaging because they were very, very, very believable. Dr. No is just a simple spy story. Goldfinger has got a really clever plot. We're not going to steal all the gold in the world. We're just going to make half of it radioactive, and the half that I own is going to be worth so much more. But it's manageable. It's a world. It's Sean Connery versus Oddjob. It's something. And then they had to keep topping themselves, right? So they had to keep topping themselves. So next thing you know, you got Thunderball. Okay, now we've got armies of underwater frogmen. Okay, fine. That's not fine. I'm still with it. Good. And then you get into things like Moonraker and not even that. Diamonds Are Forever. Now we have the underground caves. You only live twice. Now we have the secret base inside a volcano, and it's no longer about a guy with a gun. It's now about a guy who's going to use a gigantic diamond and reflect it off the moon in order to destroy Washington, and all of this nonsense. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when it's like a singer who starts here and then who hits a higher note. And by the time they got finished with the Brosnan movies, they realized that there is no note higher than this. We can't do anything higher than this, than Pierce Brosnan on a parowing surfing a tsunami around icebergs. They couldn't make it any bigger than that. It was done. It was over. And the genius of it was when they went to Daniel Craig in Casino Royale, they went right back to the beginnings. It was now, all of a sudden, it goes from being orbiting space stations and guys in yellow jumpsuits and lasers and all of this stuff. Now it's a guy with a gun trying to get another guy with a gun in a small confined space, and all of a sudden you're connected again. You're back there. You're with it. So I'm not saying that the comic book movies are done, but I'm saying they're past their peak. There's nothing interesting or new there for me. I mean, I know who Spider-Man is, and I know who Iron Man is, and I know who Thor is, and yeah, it's really cool to see them all on the same screen. And by the way, just parenthetically, this Infinity War, the bad guy in this, I don't know his name, I'm not much of a comic book fan, but he's this giant purple villain, the super villain. And he is the phoniest looking CG I've seen in a long, long, long time. He looks like a Sunday morning cartoon show, CG. Snape. On the other hand, from the new Star Wars movies, he looked convincing and unpleasant. So there you go. I don't know whether Hollywood is aware of the fact that conservatives can watch these movies without puking. The great irony here is they stopped making movies for the American people because the politics diverted so much from the American people. And they got away with it because of money from Saudi Arabia and from China and so on. And so they didn't have to tell movie stories that the American people liked anymore. And they thought they'd make it up on the international box office. But the problem is that the reason that there's an international box office for American films and not one for Guatemalan films is because the American experience, the America of the movies, is interesting and desirable to everybody on the earth. Truth, justice, and the American way makes sense to people everywhere. And that's why people from all around the world wanted to see American movies and wanted to come to America and be Americans. That's why. Because truth, justice, and the American way makes sense. Truth, justice, and all that stuff, which was the line they gave, what's his name in that previous Superman, Superman Returns, I guess it was. Truth, justice, all that stuff. Now it's a cynical take on it. Right now it's a mocking it. It's winking at the audience as you say the lines. And Americans don't like it, and guess what? Foreigners don't like it either. They understand that Superman is not about cynicism. It's not about irony or cynicism or anti-heroes. It's about belief in something good. That's what the original Star Trek was before they started lecturing us. And by the way, this Star Trek Discovery, I have not seen any of it except for the trailers, and it looks simply appalling because they've done exactly what everything else in the society has done. They've gone from giving us something that was about adventure and about discovery, and they've turned it into a social engineering laboratory. And I blame Next Generation, I'm sorry. The fight, the struggle continues. Original series, Next Generation. But the idea that one of the people on the bridge is going to be the resident psychologist mystic who senses a great deal of hostility on the Romulan ship that's firing at us, it's stupid. And the whole holodeck was just, we're out of ideas, so let's tell a gangster movie. Why don't you do what real men do, which is go to a gangster planet like they did in the original? Anyway, you get that. So in any event, that's a comic book answer. I think we'll do maybe one or two more tops, and I've got to get on out of here.